You've been working on the same thing for 3 weeks. Not because it's complicated, not because you don't know what it needs.
You know exactly what it needs.
You've known since week 1.
But every time you get close to done, you find one more thing that's not quite right.
One more paragraph that could be sharper. One more section that needs another pass. One more reason that this version is not the version you can let out into the world.
And here is the thing you haven't said out loud yet. You are not sure it's ever going to be ready. Because ready means released.
And released means judged. And judge means something.
Something you've been postponing for 3 weeks. The people around you see someone with high standards. Someone who cares. Someone who won't put their name on work that isn't excellent. And that's true, you do care, and the standards are real.
But there is something else happening underneath the care and the standards.
That is costing you in ways you are starting to feel, but haven't yet been able to name.
Because perfectionism,
the way you're living it, is not about the work.
The work is the container. What's actually in the container is something that has nothing to do with quality. And until you can see that clearly, the 3-week document becomes a 5-week document, becomes a career defined by output that never quite arrives.
In 1991, 2 psychologists named Paul Hewitt and Gordon Flett published research
that drew a line between 2 things that had been conflated for years: high standards and perfectionism. High standards, they found, are about the work. You care about quality, you invest in craft, and when the work is done, it is done, and you remain intact whether it succeeds or fails. Because the work and your worth are separate objects. Maladaptive perfectionism is different. It's not about the work.
It's about what the work means, specifically. It is the condition in which the quality of your output becomes the primary measure of your value as a person.
Not a partial measure.
Not one factor among many.
The measure.
Psychologists call this contingent self-worth the architecture in which your sense of being a person of value is conditional.
Conditional on your performance meeting a standard. And here is what that architecture does to perfectionism specifically.
It transforms every piece of work from a task into a referendum.
A vote on whether you are, at a fundamental level, good enough.
When every deliverable is a referendum, the stakes of each one are not professional.
They are existential.
And here is the mechanism that makes the document stay open for 3 weeks.
If the work goes out and is found wanting,
it is not the work that was found wanting.
It is you, your judgment, your intelligence,
your right to be in the room, your entire accumulated sense of yourself as someone who is capable. All of it on the line, every time. The metaphor that makes this precise. Imagine a surgeon who is also, somehow, the patient.
Every operation is also an operation on themselves. The stakes of getting it right are not just professional.
They are existential and personal simultaneously, because the outcome will be experienced in their own body.
That is what perfectionism feels like from the inside. The work is not separate from you. It is you externalized, and you do not send yourself out into the world until you are certain completely, unassailably certain,
that the response will not break something essential.
Which raises the question the rest of this video has to answer.
Because if this is true, if perfectionism is a contingent self-worth structure rather than a quality control mechanism,
then the question isn't how do I produce better work faster? The question is, how did your worth become conditional?
Conditional on your output in the first place.
What made that equation feel like the only available one?
Contingent self-worth doesn't arrive in adulthood. It is assembled, slowly and logically, in childhood, from the specific conditions that governed how approval was given.
Think about how you received praise when you were young. Was it given freely, unconditionally, independent of output?
Or was it predominantly tied to achievement, to the grade, the performance, the result?
Was the praise warm and consistent in the ordinary moments? Or did the warmth increase noticeably around accomplishment?
I want to be careful here, because this is not about blame.
Most of the people who installed this equation in you did so with genuine love.
They praised the achievement because the achievement was praiseworthy.
They celebrated the result because the result deserved celebration. But here is what a child's nervous system constructs from that pattern. Over years, without anyone intending it. The praise comes when I perform. The warmth increases when I achieve.
Therefore, my value to the people I love is tied to the quality of what I produce.
Not, I am loved and I also happen to do well.
But, I'm loved because I do well.
And the logical extension of that belief, if I stop doing well, if I produce something that falls short, that fails,
something essential about my standing with the people I need will change. That belief was not irrational.
In many environments, it was accurate. The warmth really did correlate with performance. The child who constructed the equation was doing what children always do, reading the available data and building a model for how love works. The problem is that the model migrated, intact, unexamined, still running the original code. It followed you into your education, then your career, then every room where someone has the authority to evaluate what you've made.
And it translates every moment of professional feedback into the original question: am I still valued here?
Does this result change how I'm held? Here is what perfectionism is actually protecting.
Not the quality of the work,
The equation itself, because the equation, for all the suffering it produces, is also a structure.
it tells you how to be safe.
Produce excellent work, and your belonging is secured.
It gives you a technology for managing the anxiety of conditional love. A technology you've been using for so long, it no longer feels like a strategy. It feels like who you are. And here is the real cost, the one that tends to arrive quietly around 35.
The work is never excellent enough to finally, permanently resolve the underlying question. The referendum never closes.
Because the question underneath wasn't ever really about the work. It was about whether you are lovable when you're ordinary, whether you belong in a room when you're wrong.
Whether the people who matter stay when the performance slips.
No document, however carefully revised, can answer that.
Which is why the document stays open.
The standard advice for perfectionism is deadline-based. Set a timer. Ship it. Done is better than perfect.
And that advice fails on the people who need it most, because it treats perfectionism as a time management problem.
And it is not a time management problem. It is a self-worth architecture problem.
You cannot set a timer on an existential referendum. Here is the one thing, and it is not about the work at all.
The contingent self-worth structure runs on fusion, on the merger of the work and the self into a single object. As long as they are fused, every critique of the work is a critique of the person. Every imperfect sentence is evidence for the original verdict. And the only rational response is to keep the work unpublished, where the verdict cannot arrive. The intervention, the thing that actually addresses the root, is practicing the separation of those two objects.
Not once, dramatically, slowly, repeatedly, in small moments before the stakes are high.
Here is how it works in practice. The next time you receive feedback on anything, however minor, before you respond or process it, ask one question. Is this a comment on the work, or is it a comment on me?
Not rhetorically.
Specifically,
The feedback is, this paragraph is unclear. Is the paragraph you? Or did you write a paragraph that needs revision? The feedback is, this approach isn't quite right.
is the approach your worth as a professional, or is it a direction that needs adjusting?
The question sounds simple. It isn't.
Because for someone running a contingent self-worth structure, those two objects have been fused for so long
That the separation feels artificial at first, even wrong.
like claiming the work isn't yours, like detachment from something you care about. But detachment is not what you're practicing. You are practicing authorship without merger, the idea that you can care deeply about something you made, invest fully in its quality, and still when the response comes back remain a separate and intact person, that the work can be imperfect without the imperfection traveling back up the line to you. That practice, done consistently in small moments, is what gradually dismantles the referendum.
Not by lowering your standards can stay exactly where they are, but by changing what a below standard result means.
Moving it from verdict to information.
From self-indictment to revision note. The document that has been open for 3 weeks doesn't need a deadline. It needs you to believe, in some new and unfamiliar way,
That the person who wrote it will still be whole when it goes out. That not perfect is a description of the draft, not a description of you.
the document is going to go out. Maybe this week, maybe next, and something in you, the part that has been running the referendum for 30-some years,
Is going to watch it go and feel the familiar lurch of exposure.
That feeling is not a signal that the work isn't ready. It's a signal that the equation is still running, that the old architecture is still asking, will I still be valued when they've seen it? Will the belonging hold when the performance is visible?
I don't have a quick answer to that. I don't think there is one.
The equation was built over years in specific conditions, and it revises over years in specific conditions. One imperfect thing released, response received, self still intact.
One ordinary piece of work put out into the world, and the room not changing.
One moment of being wrong and remaining whole. Those moments accumulate.
They don't erase the equation overnight, but they are the only evidence that can revise it.
Not the advice, not the deadline, not the pep talk, not the permission slip. The actual experience of the work going out and the self surviving. So here is the question I want you to carry, not to answer now. but to let find you in a quiet moment, when you're not performing for anyone. What version of yourself, ordinary, uncertain, sometimes wrong, are you still waiting for permission to let other people see?
And who, specifically, do you imagine is withholding that permission?
The answer to the second part of that question is probably not who you think it is.
And when you find it, really find it. Not the professional answer, but the honest one. Something in the way you hold your work will start, very slowly, to change.